The stars bled their last light across the void, fading like the final embers of a fire long untended. Ancient citadels drifted in silence, their broken spires reaching upward as though clawing for suns that had already died. Worlds once rich with life now lay cracked and hollow, stripped bare by war and plague, their oceans long boiled away or fouled into stagnant seas of rot. In the quiet vastness of the galaxy, empires rose and fell, and even the memory of their triumphs dissolved into ash. It is here, in this twilight of fading glory, that our tale begins. And before we begin the story, know this: we truly love and care for you. You are welcome here among these echoes of empires. So tell us, where in the world are you watching from? And what time is it there? Now let us begin. Mortarion stood at the threshold of his fortress upon Barbarus, gazing out into the mists that clung to the poisoned mountains. The peaks stretched endlessly, jagged like broken teeth, and the air was heavy with toxins that would choke a mortal in moments. Yet Mortarion, son of the Emperor and Lord of the Death Guard, breathed it as though it were life itself. The mists were his cradle and his curse, a reminder of the world that had birthed him, enslaved him, and shaped his hatred for tyranny. But even as he stood among the ruins of victory, he felt the weight of defeat pressing upon him. The galaxy had never been his to command, though he had once believed otherwise. The Imperium had cast him aside, his father's promises of freedom and truth revealed as shackles. He had traded one tyranny for another, bowing to a power far older and darker. Nurgle, the Lord of Decay, whispered ceaselessly in the marrow of his bones, promising endurance, eternity, and a dominion that would never wither. Yet each gift came clothed in chains. Mortarion despised chains. He looked down upon the valley below, where his legions assembled in slow, grinding order. Their armor, once proud and unblemished, bore the pitted scars of endless war. Rust gnawed at ceramite plates, and foul growth sprouted from the cracks. Once they had been the Emperor's chosen, his angelic warriors of deathless resolve. Now they were parodies of themselves, children of rot, their oaths twisted by the bargain their Primarch had struck. They were his sons still, but they were no longer his alone. A voice stirred in the back of his mind, deep and warm, like a festering wound. You endure, beloved child. You endure, and through you, the galaxy shall learn the beauty of decay. Mortarion clenched his gauntleted hand until the metal groaned. He wanted to cast the voice away, to silence it, but it never left. It was there in every silence, in every breath of mist. It was the truth of his existence now, the price of his immortality. He turned from the window, his expression hidden behind the pallid mask that had once been his armor's pride. His captains waited in the chamber beyond, their faces gaunt, their bodies swollen with disease. Typhon, his most loyal and most treacherous lieutenant, stood foremost, his grin a leer of rot-slick teeth. The fleets are prepared, my lord, Typhon rasped, voice bubbling with phlegm. The Imperium weakens. Their defenders scatter like frightened vermin. Soon, Barbarus will be but a memory, and the galaxy will belong to us. Us, Mortarion echoed, the word bitter on his tongue. He looked upon Typhon and remembered the moment of betrayal, the poison carried within the holds, the hand that had guided the Death Guard into damnation. Typhon had been the instrument, but Mortarion had been the will. He had chosen, in that desperate hour, to accept the plague's embrace. He had chosen survival over freedom, and in that choice he had bound them all. The chamber grew silent. The warriors awaited their Primarch's command, their faith absolute despite the corruption that consumed them. Mortarion felt their eyes upon him, not with reverence, but with hunger. Hunger for direction, hunger for conquest, hunger for meaning. They were no longer men, no longer even Astartes. They were the embodiment of decay, needing only his will to shape their ruin. His hand tightened on the haft of his great scythe, silence. Its blade whispered through the air as he moved, a promise of endings. The weapon was more than steel. It was a symbol of the reaper he had always been, cutting down oppressors, tyrants, and now the galaxy itself. Yet as he looked upon it, he wondered if the scythe now cut him most of all. "Prepare the fleets," he said at last, his voice low, but carrying through the chamber like a tolling bell. "The Imperium believes it can resist us. It believes its faith will shield it from the truth. We will show them the futility of hope." A roar of affirmation rose from his captains, their voices ragged and broken. Typhon's grin widened, and Mortarion felt again that sting of betrayal, like rot beneath a scar. He knew Typhon served his own ends, yet he allowed it. Perhaps he even needed it, for in betrayal lay truth. There was no loyalty eternal, no empire unbroken. There was only decay, and through decay, endurance. As the captains departed, leaving him once more in silence, Mortarion returned to the window. The mists thickened, curling like living things, and in them he saw the ghosts of his past. The Emperor's stern gaze, full of promises never kept. His brothers, scattered and broken, some lost to madness, others to death. His sons, who had followed him with blind devotion into damnation. And himself, a child upon the poisoned slopes of Barbarus, coughing, crying, reaching for a sky that would never be his. He wondered if that child still lived within him, buried beneath the armor and the rot. Or had he already died, long ago, the moment he had knelt before a god he did not love? The mists offered no answer. Only the voice remained, tender and terrible. "You endure, my child. You endure, and all things end in you." Mortarion closed his eyes. For a moment, the weight of his immortality pressed down upon him like the mountains of his homeworld, and he thought of freedom, the freedom he had sought his entire life, the freedom that had been denied him at every turn, freedom from tyrants, freedom from gods, freedom from chains. But freedom was the one gift he would never be given. Beyond the mists, the fleets of the Death Guard stirred, their engines coughing clouds of pestilent smoke. Soon they would sail into the void to carry plague and ruin across 1,000 worlds. Soon the galaxy would tremble. And yet, even as he prepared for war, Mortarion could not escape the truth. No empire, no matter how vast, could stand forever. The stars faded one by one until only darkness remained. The fleets of the Death Guard rumbled in orbit, a constellation of rusted hulls and diseased leviathans that drifted like carrion birds above a carcass. From Barbarus, the sight was a crown of ruin encircling the poisoned world, a reminder that Mortarion's reach now stretched far beyond the mountains of his birth. Yet in that sight, he found no triumph. Where others saw dominion, he saw only rot spreading outward, a slow suffocation of the galaxy itself. Within the fortress, Mortarion's steps echoed down endless corridors carved into the mountain stone. The walls sweated with damp, the air thick with fumes and spores. He walked alone, his warriors too fearful to shadow him in these moments of solitude. Silence, his scythe, rested across his back, its weight familiar, almost comforting. But Mortarion knew the comfort was a lie, as much a chain as the whispers of Nurgle that crawled through his veins. He entered the war chamber, its great table alive with flickering projections of distant systems. Stars flared and dimmed in spectral light, each marked with runes of conquest or ruin. Around the table stood his captains, their armor corroded, their faces hidden behind masks of decay. At their head was Typhon, as ever, his presence thick as miasma. The first captain bowed low, though the gesture was a parody of respect, his grin spreading like a wound. "My lord," Typhon said, voice rasping through bubbling lungs, "the Imperium fortifies its borders. Reports speak of crusades mustering, eager to push us back. They will bleed themselves dry in the effort, and we shall be there to savor the remains." The captains chuckled, the sound hollow, but Mortarion raised a hand, and silence fell. His gaze swept over them, one by one. These were his sons, bound to him by blood, by oath, by damnation. And yet, in their eyes, he saw the shadow of something else: hunger, ambition. The same thirst that had once driven him to rise against the tyrants of Barbarus. It was a reflection he did not welcome. "We do not fight for savoring," Mortarion said, his voice like iron striking stone. "We fight because war is all that remains to us. Do not mistake indulgence for purpose." A murmur ran through the chamber. Typhon's grin did not falter, but his eyes narrowed, glinting with the promise of unspoken defiance. "As you command, father." Still, the men whisper. They hunger for victories, for plunder, for the gifts of grandfather. Should we not feed their hunger, lest it turn against us? The word father stung like acid. Mortarion had never wanted to be a father. He had wanted to be a liberator, a breaker of chains. Yet here he stood, chained himself, father to legions of monsters who looked upon him as both master and jailer. He leaned upon the table, his fingers brushing through the shifting lights of dying stars. "The Imperium does not bleed easily. Every world we claim, they will fight to reclaim. Every fortress we desecrate, they will rebuild. And still, the rot will spread. That is our purpose. Not indulgence, not gluttony, endurance. That is what Nurgle demands of us." The captains bowed their heads, though whether in agreement or resignation, Mortarion could not say. The chamber fell silent, save for the hum of the projectors. For a moment, he allowed himself to believe they still listened, still obeyed out of something more than fear or greed. But when the council ended and the captains dispersed, Typhon lingered. He stepped close, his armor exuding a stink of bile and pus, his grin carved deeper. "You speak of endurance, my lord, but endurance without joy is hollow. The men crave more. They need to feel the touch of grandfather's love. Do you not feel it yourself? Does it not soothe you?" Mortarion turned, his shadow stretching long across the chamber wall. "Love," he repeated, the word a blade on his tongue. "What I feel is slavery. What I feel is a chain that digs deeper with every victory. Do not mistake that for love." Typhon's grin faltered, but only for an instant. He bowed again, his laughter bubbling in his throat. "As you say, Lord. Still, the chain is strong, and even you cannot break it. Perhaps in time, you will learn to cherish it, as we do." Mortarion said nothing more. He left the chamber, the sound of Typhon's laughter chasing him like a spectre. He wandered the fortress, past rusting gates and halls filled with chanting cultists. They sang praises to Nurgle, their voices wet and joyous, their bodies riddled with sores. He watched them, their devotion unshaken, their joy in decay complete. He envied them, in a way, for they had accepted their fate without question. There was no conflict in them, no doubt, only peace in rot. But Mortarion was not at peace. He never had been. From the poisoned skies of Barbarus to the golden halls of terror, he had carried conflict like a wound that would never heal. He had fought tyrants and become one. He had sought freedom and found chains. He had sworn vengeance and received only servitude. That night, if night could be named beneath the choking mists, he stood once more upon the battlements. The fleets gleamed faintly above, their engines pulsing like diseased hearts. Below, the valleys writhed with life twisted into grotesque forms. Warriors training amid clouds of flies, engines groaning as they belched pestilence into the air. And in the stillness, the voice came again. You endure, my child. You are my strength, my harvest, my gift to the galaxy. Why do you resist what you are? Mortarion closed his eyes. Because I did not choose this. Choice is the lie of mortals, the voice whispered, tender, suffocating. You endure. That is truth enough. He opened his eyes to the darkness. Somewhere, deep in the void, the Imperium gathered its strength. He could almost hear their prayers, their defiance, their desperate hope that decay could be held at bay. For a fleeting moment, he admired them, not for their emperor, whom he despised, but for their refusal to bow. That defiance was what he had once lived for. Now he brought only its end. The mist thickened around him, curling like chains. He stood unmoving, a lord of ruin, a prisoner of eternity. And in the silence, he whispered words no one else would hear. Freedom is the one gift denied to me. The fleet stirred. War was coming. The haze of Barbarus clung to Mortarion's armor like a shroud, a living reminder of the world he could never leave behind. The poisoned wind carried whispers of the past, the cries of the fallen, the laughter of children long dead, the roar of tyrants he had once sought to destroy. He inhaled deeply, though the air would have killed a mortal, and let the memories wash over him. They were his burden and his strength, though neither offered solace. Below, the Death Guard's legions prepared for the coming campaign. Their movements were slow, deliberate, each step a testament to endurance and inevitability. The men were hollowed by disease, their flesh mottled and blistered, yet they marched with the precision of a machine, their devotion to him unquestioned. Still, he knew that devotion was not loyalty. It was survival, fear, a hunger for something greater than themselves. And he wondered, with a sharp twist in his chest, whether he too had become that. A creature driven not by purpose, but by the simple need to endure. Typhon approached as Mortarion descended into the musty corridors of the fortress. His gait was deliberate, the sound of his rusting armor echoing off the walls. The fleets are ready, my lord, he said, voice wet and rasping. The warships hum like the hearts of giants. Soon, the Imperium will tremble at our passage, Mortarion's eyes. Pale and piercing beneath the shadow of his helm, followed Typhon. Do you ever tire of your words? He asked. You speak as though we command destiny itself, yet destiny is a cruel mistress. She laughs at our arrogance. Typhon's grin widened, a blade of decay cutting across his features. Ah, but it is a sweet laughter, is it not? The galaxy fears us. They will whisper our names in dread for millennia. You have given them reason to fear, Lord, and they are slow to learn. That is the gift we bring. Mortarion felt a chill crawl along his spine. There was truth in Typhon's words, but a deeper, darker truth lurked beneath the surface. Ambition. Typhon's devotion was never absolute. He hungered for more than service, for power beyond Mortarion's command. And yet, Mortarion allowed it. Perhaps he needed it. Perhaps even a Primarch must endure the treachery of his own sons to remind himself that he was still alive. They walked in silence through the Hall of War, where maps of plague-ravaged worlds shimmered with sickly green light. Mortarion paused before a projection of a system yet untouched by the Death Guard. The worlds were vibrant, teeming with life. their inhabitants blissfully unaware of the disease that would soon claim them. He felt no anger at the Imperium, only a hollow ache that once might have been empathy. Soon, he murmured, almost to himself, all will understand that decay is inevitable. Typhon's voice cut through the mist. And yet, my lord, there are those who will resist. The Imperium never falters, not completely. There are heroes who will rise, who will stand against us. Do you not fear them? Mortarion's laugh was a hollow rasp. Fear? I have known fear since the moment I drew my first breath on Barbarus. I have stared into tyranny, death, and betrayal, and yet I endure. What is one more challenge? The Imperium will break. It always does. And if it does not, then it will rot from within, and even that is acceptable. Typhon nodded, though suspicion flickered in his eyes. Mortarion's conviction was formidable, yet fragile. The words carried the weight of command, but they lacked warmth, lacking the subtle certainty of a soul at peace. Perhaps that was the truth of it, that even a Primarch, a being who had conquered worlds and survived centuries, could not escape the erosion of hope, the corrosion of the spirit. The corridors shifted beneath their feet, the fortress alive with the moans of the diseased and the hum of corrupted machinery. Mortarion felt the pulse of it in his bones, in his chest, in the very marrow of his being. He was a child of Barbarus, a lord of plague, a servant of Nurgle. And yet, he was not content. He had achieved dominion, he had embraced immortality, and still he longed for something lost, something he could neither name nor reclaim. In the war chamber, Typhon paused once more. "My lord," he said, softer now, "you have endured longer than any man, longer than any god. But there are whispers among the fleet, doubts that even you cannot dispel. They speak of hesitation, of indecision, of regret. Are you certain of the path we walk?" Mortarion's eyes met Typhon's, pale and empty, yet filled with the weight of centuries. "Certainty is a luxury mortals cling to," he said. "I endure. That is all the certainty I need. The path is laid before us, and we will walk it, whatever it may demand." Typhon's grin returned, though tempered with caution. "As you command, father." Mortarion turned away, his gaze once more drifting to the distant void. Stars shimmered in the darkness, worlds teetered on the brink of annihilation, and the Death Guard readied themselves for the first strike. He imagined the screams of those who would fall, the rot that would spread, the despair that would flourish in the vacuum of space. And yet, even as he envisioned the inevitability of death, he felt the ghost of longing stir within him, a memory of what might have been, of the freedom denied to him, of the light that had faded long ago. He knelt upon the cold stone of the battlements, letting the mists wrap him in their suffocating embrace. His scythe, silence, lay across his knees. The weight was comforting. It was familiar. It was truth. And in that truth, he found a sliver of resolve. He would endure. He would bring ruin to the galaxy. He would serve Nurgle and yet remain, in some fragment of himself, free, if only in thought. From the shadows of the fortress, Typhon watched, his expression unreadable beneath his corroded helm. There was respect there, yes, but also calculation. Loyalty had limits, even to a son of the Emperor. And Mortarion, in his endless endurance, was beginning to sense it. Betrayal was a blade that never left his side, and in the vast silence of Barbarus, he could feel its whisper through the mists. The Death Guard would sail into the void, and with them, plague and decay would follow. But beyond the war, beyond the conquest, the question remained. Could Mortarion endure the chains he had chosen? the immortality he had embraced, the suns who would inevitably turn. The stars faded once more into darkness, and in the void a voice whispered, patient and terrible, "You endure, my child, but even endurance has its cost." The air within the fortress was thick, heavy with spores that curled and drifted like smoke through the cold stone corridors. Mortarion moved silently, his boots pressing into the wet, corrupted floor, each step echoing like a death knell through the empty hallways. The Death Guard, ever vigilant, kept their distance, sensing the storm that brewed behind his gaze. Their loyalty was earned through fear, necessity, and the slow accretion of centuries of obedience. But Mortarion knew that fear alone was a brittle foundation. Even steel can shatter. He paused at a balcony overlooking the valleys below, where the mists swirled around the corrupted citadels. The landscape was alive in its own way. Fungus bloomed like twisted crowns upon the mountains. Rivers ran thick with filth, and the air pulsed with the hum of unwholesome energy. Mortarion's eyes traced the endless march of his troops, their movements synchronized, yet grotesque, their flesh mottled and swollen with disease. They were perfect soldiers for a galaxy in ruin, yet imperfect instruments for the one he truly sought to serve, himself. Typhon approached from the shadows, his boots making no sound until they were nearly upon him. "You watch too long, my lord," he said, voice low and wet. "The men grow restless. Even in decay, they crave action. 1,000 worlds await, yet here you linger, wrapped in your own contemplation." Mortarion's gaze remained fixed on the valleys. "Restless is a human ailment," he said. "They are not human." He turned slowly, eyes pale and piercing beneath the shadow of his helm. "And yet I feel their restlessness as though it were my own." Typhon's grin widened, the glint of ambition sharp in the dim light. "Then perhaps it is not merely restlessness you feel, my lord, but doubt. You question the path, the inevitability of our conquest." Mortarion's hand brushed along the haft of silence, feeling the familiar weight. "Doubt is the shadow of mortality," he said quietly, "and I am eternal. My path is written in the decay that follows me. That is certainty enough." Yet even as he spoke, a flicker of unease crept into his chest. He had endured centuries, fought tyrants and brothers alike, yet this endurance carried with it a burden that pressed deeper with each passing moment. Immortality was not a gift. It was a sentence, and a sentence was meaningless without purpose. Typhon studied him, noting the subtle tremor in his posture, the way the Primarch's hands flexed upon the scythe's haft. "Purpose, my lord, is often found in action, not reflection," he said. "The fleets await your command. The Imperium will not wait for contemplation. Shall we strike, or shall the galaxy wait?" Mortarion's gaze drifted back to the mists. "Strike," he said at last, voice low but resolute, "but not with blind fury. Every action must serve the end. Every conquest must leave a mark of inevitability." Typhon inclined his head, hiding the flicker of doubt that passed over his features. "As you wish, father. Yet know this, even inevitability can be challenged. There are those in the fleets who watch as closely as I do, questioning whether you remain the master or have become merely another chain in Nurgle's embrace." Mortarion's breath caught, the weight of those words sinking like lead. He had always known, in the quiet moments when the mists and the silence wrapped him like a shroud, that his dominion was precarious. Authority over the Death Guard, even over centuries of loyalty, was not absolute. It could be challenged by ambition, by fear, or by the slow, insidious whisper of doubt. He turned away from the balcony and descended into the inner sanctum, where the engines of the fortress groaned and hissed, belching plumes of tainted air into the vaulted chamber. Here, among the machinery and the pulsing energy of the mists, he was alone with his thoughts. Here, the weight of immortality pressed upon him fully, reminding him that he could endure, but he could not escape. In the silence, he spoke to the one voice that had never left him, the voice that both soothed and suffocated. You endure, my child. You are the herald of change, the instrument of rot, the seed of inevitability. And yet, Mortarion whispered, his words lost in the hum of corrupted engines, even inevitability comes at a price. What do I endure if nothing remains to witness it? What is triumph if the soul that commands it is buried beneath its own decay? The engines groaned, and the fortress seemed to shiver in acknowledgement. Mortarion felt the weight of centuries pressing upon him, the ghosts of brothers and sons, of worlds conquered and destroyed. Every victory had left a wound, every conquest a scar, and every oath a chain. He was eternal and yet bound, mighty and yet lonely, victorious and yet hollow. Footsteps echoed behind him, and he did not turn. Typhon's presence was always close, always observing. You speak of hollow victory, my lord, Typhon said softly. Perhaps that is the cost of immortality. Perhaps it is the burden you chose when you embraced the plague. Yet even hollow victories can inspire loyalty. Even decay can command respect. You have only to wield it. Mortarion's hands tightened upon silence. Wield it, he repeated. I wielded tyranny to free myself. I wielded plague to endure. And still, it is never enough. The galaxy resists. Even those I command resist in subtle ways. Every action ripples through shadows, and shadows breed treachery. Typhon inclined his head slowly. And yet you endure. That is proof enough that your command is absolute, even if the men do not always understand it. Fear, respect, devotion, all are forms of obedience, and obedience is the only certainty in a galaxy such as ours. Mortarion closed his eyes, letting the weight of his thoughts press into him. In the darkness behind his lids, he saw the mists of Barbarus, the faces of the fallen, the endless horizon of corrupted worlds. He felt the pull of something long denied, a longing for freedom, for choice, for an end to chains that even Nurgle could not sever. And yet, the fleets waited. The galaxy would not pause. War would come, and with it, the spread of plague, the decay of worlds, the cries of the Imperium's defenders. Mortarion was eternal, and he would endure. That alone was enough to shape the course of history. The mists swirled around him, thickening, as if to remind him that eternity was never silent. Somewhere, in the void beyond Barbarus, the first sparks of the coming campaign were already flickering, and the Death Guard awaited their lord's command. Mortarion's gaze hardened. He would endure. He would command. He would bring inevitability to the galaxy. But even as he prepared for war, he could not silence the voice that whispered in the marrow of his bones. Even endurance has its cost, my child. The mists of Barbarus clung to Mortarion like a shroud, thick and suffocating, yet oddly comforting in their embrace. The world itself seemed alive, as if the very soil and stone remembered the first breath of the Primarch, the cries of the oppressed, the slow decay that had shaped him into the Lord of Plague and Ruin. He walked the battlements in silence, the great scythe, silence resting against his broad shoulder, its edge faintly shimmering with the promise of death. Beneath him, the Death Guard drilled in the valleys, their movements both meticulous and grotesque. Blisters bubbled on their flesh, Pustules burst in silent testimony to the gift of Nurgle, and yet they moved with perfect synchronicity. To a mortal observer, they would seem unstoppable. To Mortarion, they were reminders of the price of obedience, of loyalty bought with flesh and fear. He wondered how many of them truly followed him, and how many merely endured because survival demanded it. Typhon approached, his rusted armor groaning with each step. He spoke softly, almost reverently, as though the mists themselves carried his words to Mortarion's ears before he turned to face them. "The fleets await your command, Lord. Worlds will fall, and yet whispers rise among the men. They speak in hushed tones of hesitation, of uncertainty. Even our sons fear the inevitability of decay." Mortarion's pale eyes glinted beneath his helm. "Hesitation is a mortal ailment," he said, voice low and cutting. "We endure. We spread decay. That is enough. Fear and uncertainty are tools, Typhon, not weaknesses. Yet even tools may rebel if they are not guided carefully." Typhon's grin flickered, more thoughtful than usual. "Indeed, guidance is the challenge of command, my lord. Even the strongest of wills may crack under the weight of eternity. How do you bear it? The constant burden of knowing that nothing is permanent, that even your own sons may betray you." Mortarion's hand drifted to the haft of silence. The weapon was heavy, comforting, and a reminder that some burdens could be wielded. "I endure," he said simply. "I endure because I must. The galaxy does not wait for hesitation. It does not pause for reflection. Those who falter are consumed. I will not falter." Yet in the silence that followed, he felt the subtle unease of doubt, a prickling awareness that even he could not fully control. The Death Guard had served him for centuries, but loyalty was never absolute. Typhon himself carried ambition, and in the careful gleam of his eyes, Mortarion sensed the first stirrings of rebellion. Perhaps he needed it, he told himself. Perhaps betrayal was the only thing that reminded him he was alive, that his will still mattered in a galaxy that sought to deny it. The sound of distant engines drew Mortarion's attention. The fleets of the Death Guard stirred, their great hulls glowing faintly with corrupted power. They were prepared for war, a slow, grinding march toward inevitability. Yet in the preparation, Mortarion felt the first subtle tremors of fear among his sons. Not the kind that could be quelled with command alone, but the whisper of doubt, the silent questioning of purpose, the almost imperceptible longing for something beyond decay. He descended into the inner chambers, the fortress alive with groaning machinery and the sibilant chorus of cultists. They moved among the engines, their bodies swollen and twisted, singing praises to Nurgle as though the god himself had infused them with the music of rot. Mortarion watched them, noting the devotion that was complete, unquestioning. He envied them, in a way, for they had surrendered to inevitability, and in surrender found peace. He had never known peace. A voice stirred in the shadows. It was Typhon, leaning against the stone, with the casual ease of someone who had watched centuries pass and counted them as nothing. "You brood too long, my lord," he said. "Even the mists cannot protect you from the weight of eternity. The men grow restless, and if their restlessness turns inward, who will hold the fleets together?" Mortarion's gaze met Typhon's, pale eyes unflinching. "I am not concerned with restlessness," he said. "I am concerned with purpose. Every action, every conquest, every whisper of decay is a thread in the tapestry we weave. The men follow because they must. They endure because they cannot do otherwise. That is enough." Typhon inclined his head slowly. "Perhaps it is, my lord. And yet, even inevitability can falter. Even decay can be resisted. You are eternal, yes, but eternity is lonely. Even the strongest may crave warmth or companionship or freedom. Mortarion's grip tightened on silence. Freedom is the one gift denied to me. Companionship is a luxury mortals cling to. Eternity demands sacrifice, Typhon. Every victory carries a cost, and every chain is both punishment and protection. I endure because I must. That alone is enough to shape the galaxy. Typhon's gaze lingered on him, calculating, almost admiring. And yet, my lord, in your endurance, do you ever wonder if you are truly free? Or are you merely a servant to inevitability, to Nurgle, to your own unyielding will? Mortarion said nothing for a moment, letting the question hang in the humid air. The engines hummed, the cultists sang, and the mists swirled in endless eddies. Perhaps, he admitted finally, voice low, perhaps I am a servant. But even a servant may shape the course of history. Even within chains, I endure. That is my freedom. Typhon's grin returned, though tempered with unease. Then let us wield that freedom wisely, my lord. The galaxy will tremble beneath our feet, and yet there are whispers that not all will follow. Not all will endure as we do. Even the strongest chains may break. Mortarion turned back to the balcony, staring into the swirling mists below. The Death Guard trained, drilled, and prepared for war. Their loyalty forged in flesh, fear, and centuries of obedience. The galaxy awaited them, unaware of the plague that would sweep through its worlds, the rot that would consume its defenders, the inevitability that Mortarion brought with him. And yet, in the recesses of his mind, the flicker of doubt remained. Typhon, the legions, the vast, decaying fleets, they were all part of a system he had shaped, yet none could be fully trusted. Loyalty was fragile, ambition subtle, and eternity long enough to allow even the closest sons to become enemies. The mists thickened, curling like fingers of the past, touching the present, and reminding him that even immortality carried its own burdens. Mortarion clenched the haft of silence, drawing comfort from its weight, and whispered into the swirling fog, I endure. That is my command, my will, my curse, and even in doubt, I endure. The fleets waited, silent and immense, ready to bring decay to a galaxy that believed itself eternal. The war was coming, inevitability marching at the forefront, and Mortarion would lead, though even he sensed the first cracks forming in the armor of obedience, the whispers of rebellion buried in shadow. And somewhere in the mists, Typhon watched, patient, ambitious, and ever calculating, knowing that even the Lord of Decay might one day falter. The winds of Barbarus carried the stench of rot and sulphur, a familiar cloak that wrapped the world in perpetual twilight. Mortarion moved among the battlements once more, his gauntleted hands brushing along the corroded stone as if seeking some anchor in the decay. Below, the Death Guard moved like a tide of pestilence, their march synchronized and silent, save for the occasional cough or groan that echoed the curse of Nurgle in their veins. Mortarion's eyes traced their forms, swollen and distorted by the gift of the Plague Lord, and yet he felt no pride, only the subtle, gnawing weight of unease. He knew the cracks had begun. Loyalty, even among the most devoted, was a fragile veneer over ambition, fear, and desire. Typhon had spoken of whispers among the fleets, of murmurs in the shadows, and Mortarion could feel the currents beneath the surface. Not all were content with blind obedience. Some harbored questions, and questions were the seeds of rebellion. Typhon approached, his armor scraping faintly against the corroded stone. The fleets are ready, he said, voice low, wet with phlegm. The worlds we march against are unaware of the storm that approaches. And yet, some of the men speak of hesitation. They look at you and wonder, even in their corrupted hearts, if the path we walk is inevitable, or if the decay has taken more than it should. Mortarion's eyes narrowed beneath his helm. Hesitation is a mortal ailment. These men endure, and in their endurance they will follow. That is enough. Typhon inclined his head, a faint flicker of something sharper in his gaze. Is it? Even chains can rust, Lord. Even the strongest loyalty bends when ambition and fear collide. We have served centuries together, yet there are whispers I cannot ignore. Even you, Lord, may not be immune to doubt. Mortarion's hand brushed the haft of silence, the great scythe that had ended countless lives. Its weight was both comfort and reminder of inevitability. Doubt is the shadow of mortality. I am beyond it. My purpose is clear. Decay is inevitable. The Imperium will fall, and all that stands in our path will crumble. Typhon's grin returned, though sharper, calculating. And yet, Lord, there is a question in your gaze. Even as you speak of inevitability, I see the ghost of hesitation. You weigh the cost of victory, and perhaps even the burden of your own son's loyalty. The men watch, my lord. Even they sense it. Mortarion's lips tightened. He did not deny it. Eternity was a prison, and the longer one endured, the more its bars pressed inward. Immortality was no gift. It was a sentence. He had seen empires rise and fall, brothers turn against him, and worlds crumble beneath the weight of disease and war. And still he endured, carrying the weight of centuries, the whispers of Nurgle, and the gnawing question of whether even he had escaped the chains he wielded. Below, in the valleys, the Death Guard drilled under the watchful eyes of their lieutenants. Some were faithful without question. Others carried the faintest trace of hesitation in their posture, the tilt of a head, the way fingers flexed nervously against pitted armor. Mortarion felt it, the subtle friction of doubt that rippled through the ranks, knowing that when the fleets moved, when the first plague struck, it would either solidify loyalty or shatter it. Typhon's voice drew him back. Shall we address it, Lord? The whispers? Or shall we let inevitability guide them, as it has guided you? Mortarion's gaze lingered on the mist-choked valleys. Inevitable decay is a teacher, he said finally. Those who falter will learn their place. Those who endure will become stronger. There is no need for direct intervention, only observation. Typhon's expression hardened slightly, and Mortarion sensed the subtle defiance beneath the surface. The lieutenant had always been ambitious, but now the ambition had begun to test boundaries. He would not act outright. Typhon was clever enough, but Mortarion knew the tide of doubt could rise quickly if not carefully watched. The Primarch turned from the balcony and descended into the inner sanctum, the fortress alive with the hiss of engines and the groan of corrupted machinery. Here, the mists mingled with the sound of chanting cultists, their bodies twisted and bloated, singing praises to Nurgle with wet, gurgling voices. Mortarion watched them, feeling the calm of their complete surrender to inevitability, envying them in a way. They were at peace in decay. He was not. The silence of the inner sanctum pressed upon him. Immortality was lonely. Authority was brittle. Even the bonds of blood and command could fracture beneath the weight of ambition and doubt. He knew this truth intimately, had felt it in every betrayal of brother and son alike, in every world that resisted his conquest, in every shadow that whispered of treachery. And yet, he endured. That was his curse, and his gift. A distant alarm echoed through the fortress, a warning signal from the fleets. The campaign was about to begin. Mortarion raised silence, letting its edge catch the dim light of corrupted engines. Every strike, every plague-ridden world, every whisper of decay would be his testament. Yet even as the inevitability of war approached, he felt the first tremors of internal conflict. Not within himself, but within the sons he commanded, within the chains he had forged, within the fragile veneer of loyalty that could crumble at any moment. Typhon observed him from the shadows, silent but present. "We march soon," he said, "and soon the galaxy will learn the cost of inevitability. Yet, do you truly trust those who follow you? Even your most faithful may falter when faced with choice, with consequence. Even they may question what they have endured." Mortarion's hand rested on the haft of silence. He inhaled, tasting the thick, poisoned air of Barbarus, and exhaled slowly. "Trust is irrelevant," he said. "Obedience, endurance, inevitability, these are the only truths. The rest is illusion. They follow because they must. And when the world falls, when the plague spreads, when the Imperium crumbles, they will understand." Typhon's expression remained inscrutable, though the faintest flicker of unease crossed his features. Mortarion knew that, even now, as he spoke of inevitability and endurance, seeds of doubt were planted. Loyalty was fragile, an eternity long enough for even the closest suns to turn. The mists swirled around him, curling like fingers of the past, wrapping him in the weight of centuries. Mortarion raised his gaze to the stars beyond, to the distant systems that awaited the coming storm. He would endure, he would command, and the galaxy would tremble beneath the inevitability he carried. Yet, in the shadows, Typhon watched, patient and calculating, knowing that even the Lord of Decay might one day face the consequences of endurance stretched too thin. The void was a churning sea of darkness, broken only by the sickly glow of the Death Guard's fleets. Ships, vast and corroded, drifted like predators through the cold expanse, engines pulsating with the slow heartbeat of decay. Mortarion stood upon the bridge of the pestilent dawn, his gauntleted hands resting upon the rail, silence at his side, its edge gleaming faintly under the warped lights. The stars beyond were indifferent, distant and cold, unaware of the storm that approached. Below, Typhon moved among the lieutenants, whispering orders, watching the subtle hesitations in the ranks. Mortarion observed him with quiet scrutiny, sensing the tension coiled beneath the first captain's corroded armor. Typhon's ambition had always been tempered by patience, but now it throbbed beneath the surface, a current Mortarion could feel even across the command bridge. Loyalty was a fragile thing, and doubt was already spreading like rot through the fleet. Mortarion spoke, his voice low but resonant, carrying the weight of centuries. "The Imperium does not wait. Its defenders are slow, proud, and blind. We strike now, and the plague will spread faster than they can respond. Prepare the boarding teams, release the biochemical payloads, and ensure that none survive who can tell of our approach." Typhon bowed slightly, though the faintest glint of calculation lingered in his eyes. "As you command, my lord. But, shall I speak freely? Even in obedience, there is wisdom in caution. Not all fear inevitability. Some will fight, and in fighting, they may challenge more than just our strength." Mortarion's eyes, pale and piercing, fixed on the stars beyond. "Caution is for mortals. We endure, and through endurance, we prevail. The Imperium believes itself eternal. That arrogance will be its undoing. Let them fight if they must. Their resistance will only hasten decay." The first world approached through the void, a jewel of verdant blues and greens, spinning peacefully in silence. Mortarion's gaze lingered on it, and for a fleeting moment, a shadow of remembrance passed across his features. Barbarus had been alive once, unbroken and vibrant, and he had watched it crumble. These worlds would suffer the same fate, yet the memory brought no warmth, only the quiet ache of inevitability. Typhon spoke again, quieter this time. Even the strongest chains may break, my lord. Among our ranks, whispers grow louder. Some question the cost of your decisions. Do you sense it? Mortarion's hand tightened on silence. I sense it, and I accept it. Loyalty is fragile, and ambition waits in shadow. Yet even those who falter will endure in their place. Even doubt is a tool, if it can be directed. The boarding vessels detached from the motherships, sliding like corroded eels into the void, carrying plague, death, and inevitability. Mortarion watched them go, his mind a storm of calculation and reflection. External war was simple in comparison to the battles that churned within the fleet itself. The unspoken tension, the subtle fractures of loyalty, the faint pulse of ambition that even Typhon could not conceal. A sudden alarm broke the silence of the bridge, a shrill note that pierced the hum of corrupted engines. Sensors picked up Imperial patrols, vessels slow but armed with the stubborn courage of mortals unwilling to yield. Mortarion's gaze hardened. Prepare the biotransference payloads, he said. Do not give them the luxury of survival. Their defiance will be brief, and in their end, a lesson for the rest. Typhon's grin returned, sharp and wet. They will learn inevitability, Lord. And perhaps, in witnessing it, even the hesitant among our ranks will steel themselves. The first engagement began with the subtle elegance of inevitability. Imperial vessels surged forward, their weapons blazing, but the Death Guard moved with the patience of decay itself. Bioplasma scorched the hulls, corrosive toxins spread like whispers across decks, and the inevitability of ruin descended upon the enemy. Mortarion watched the battle unfold, not with glee, but with the quiet satisfaction of inevitability realized. Yet even in victory, he felt the stirrings of unrest within the fleet. Typhon's eyes flicked to the lieutenants, noting the subtle hesitations, the glances cast toward one another, the brief flicker of concern when a command was questioned and then obeyed. Mortarion understood it fully. Loyalty could be forged in obedience, but ambition waited, patient and calculating, in the shadows of fear. The First World fell under the touch of plague, cities dissolving into corruption and rot. Mortarion did not celebrate. He observed. Observation was the task of the immortal. The living died, and through their decay he learned. Through their resistance he measured the strength of his command. Through their despair he tested the endurance of his sons. Typhon approached again, voice low, carrying the unspoken weight of years spent watching, waiting. The campaign is progressing, Lord, and yet, among the men, the whispers grow louder. Even the devoted sense hesitation. The inevitability they witness is unquestionable, yet the cost weighs upon them. Perhaps even upon you. Lord Mortarion's pale eyes met his first captain's. I endure, he said simply. I endure because I must. That alone is enough. The men will endure as well, or they will learn their place. Ambition, doubt, hesitation. These are tools to be observed, not feared. A subtle silence fell over the bridge, the distant hum of engines mingling with the faint moans of corrupted vessels drifting through space. Mortarion closed his eyes briefly, letting the inevitability of war, the decay of worlds, and the whispers of treachery settle into the marrow of his being. This was his domain, his purpose, his curse. And yet, even in the certainty of victory, the awareness of doubt and ambition remained, a shadow that even the Primarch could not fully banish. The campaign had begun, and with it, the eternal balance between external conquest and internal unrest. Mortarion would lead, the Death Guard would endure, and the galaxy would tremble beneath the slow, grinding inevitability of plague and decay. But even as the First World fell, he knew the true war was only beginning. The war within, where ambition, doubt, and loyalty clashed in silence, shaping the destiny of those who served him and testing the endurance of the Lord of Decay himself. The stars stretched beyond the void, indifferent and cold, yet Mortarion's gaze pierced them, eternal and unyielding. He would endure, he would command, and the galaxy would remember the inevitability of his passage. The mists clung to the deck of the pestilent dawn, thick and suffocating, carrying the unmistakable stench of rot and corrosion. Mortarion moved through them like a shadow of inevitability, silence resting at his side, its edge faintly gleaming under the flickering corrupted lights. Below, the Death Guard prepared for the next strike, their movements deliberate, their bodies twisted and swollen with the gifts of Nurgle. They were perfect instruments of decay, yet even the perfection of obedience could not hide the subtle tremor of doubt creeping through their ranks. Typhon lingered at the edge of the bridge, his corroded armor catching faint glimmers of light. "The fleets respond well," he murmured, voice low and wet. "The worlds fall as planned, yet there is hesitation among the men. Even the faithful whisper in shadows, questioning decisions, questioning your command." Mortarion's pale eyes met his lieutenant's. "Questioning is human. We endure because we are beyond humanity. Let them whisper. Let them tremble. Inevitability will guide them if nothing else." Typhon's gaze sharpened. "And yet, Lord, whispers can grow. Doubt festers like disease. Even the strongest resolve can be corroded if not tended. You sense it, do you not?" Mortarion's hand drifted to silence, feeling its cold, familiar weight. "I sense it, but I endure. That is enough. Ambition, doubt, hesitation. These are tools to be observed, not feared. They shape the weak and strengthen the vigilant. A distant alarm echoed through the decks, sharp and urgent. Sensors had detected a vessel, small, nimble, yet bristling with weapons. An Imperial scout, likely sent to warn the system Mortarion had targeted next. The Primarch's pale eyes narrowed. "Prepare the boarding teams. We will teach them that resistance is meaningless. Even small vessels carry pride, and pride is easily plucked from the flesh." Typhon's grin returned, a sharp, wet blade of calculation. "And perhaps, in observing their fear, the hesitant among our men will steel themselves. Or perhaps they will see what true inevitability demands and question whether even loyalty can endure." Mortarion did not answer, focusing instead on the viewports, where the scout vessels spun gracefully, unaware of the death that approached. The first strike would be decisive, swift, and merciless. Yet he felt the quiet tug of awareness, the subtle recognition that even in victory, loyalty could falter. The Death Guard had endured centuries of plague, war, and the relentless grind of inevitability. Yet even they were not beyond the shadow of ambition. The boarding pods detached, gliding like corroded eels through the void, carrying plague, death, and the certainty of inevitability. Mortarion observed the assault, noting the movements of his sons, their efficiency, their precision. Yet even in their obedience, he could detect the faintest hesitation. The way hands lingered on weapons, the microsecond pause before executing orders, the subtle glances exchanged among lieutenants. He knew that these hesitations were harmless now, but in time they could grow into something dangerous. As the boarding teams breached the hull of the Scout, the first screams echoed through the void. The small crew was annihilated with surgical precision, their bodies consumed by toxins, rot, and biocorrosion. Mortarion felt no joy, only the cold satisfaction of inevitability realized. The fleet had observed, the hesitant had witnessed, and the lesson was clear. Resistance was futile, and obedience was survival, yet the shadows of doubt remained. Mortarion turned to Typhon, noting the subtle shift in the lieutenant's posture. "What troubles you, Typhon?" he asked. Typhon's corroded face seemed almost thoughtful beneath his helm. "Nothing, Lord. Only, even in the execution of inevitability, some among our ranks wonder if the cost is too high. If the weight of eternity of your command is heavier than any mortal or immortal should bear." Mortarion's gaze was unwavering. "I endure. That is all that matters. The fleet endures. The Death Guard endures. The galaxy will learn that inevitability is not optional. Yet you, my son, watch too closely. Even in obedience, there is calculation. Ambition may guide your thoughts as well, and I do not fear it. I only observe." Typhon's smile returned, though tempered with caution. "As you wish, Lord. Observation is the task of the immortal, is it not?" Mortarion moved to the central viewport, watching the last remnants of the scout vessel dissolve into biocorrosion and flame. The universe beyond was indifferent, cold, and eternal, yet Mortarion felt the weight of eternity pressing upon him with each passing second. Victory was assured, yet it brought no solace. Even inevitability carried a cost, the subtle, gnawing awareness that loyalty was a fragile thing, and even the most devoted could falter. The mists on the bridge thickened, curling around the Primarch like spectral fingers. He could almost hear the whispers of the past, the ghosts of fallen brothers, the memories of betrayal, the soft echo of doubt. Mortarion breathed in, letting the mists mingle with his awareness, feeling the cold, comforting weight of silence in his hands. "You endure," the shadows whispered, a voice that was both within and beyond him. But even endurance has its cost. Even the strongest may falter, and even the most devoted may betray. Mortarion's grip on silence tightened. "I endure. I command. I bring inevitability to the galaxy. That alone is my purpose. The men will endure, or they will learn their place. Ambition and doubt are tools, not threats. And when the world falls, when the plague spreads, when the Imperium crumbles, they will understand." Typhon's eyes flicked to the lieutenants, noting the subtle hesitations, the glances exchanged, the quiet, questioning in shadows. Even now, Mortarion could feel the undercurrent of ambition, the first subtle fractures that might one day become rebellion. Yet for now, they were silent, restrained, observed, and measured. The first world had fallen under the touch of plague. Mortarion's gaze lingered on the mists, the swirling decay, the subtle signs of doubt among his sons. The galaxy awaited the next strike, the next lesson in inevitability, and the first whispers of betrayal had begun to stir. The stars stretched beyond the void, indifferent and cold, yet Mortarion's presence was eternal and unyielding. He would endure, he would command, and even as the first cracks appeared among the suns he had shaped, he would watch and wait and shape inevitability to his will. The campaign had begun in earnest, but the true war, the war of loyalty, of ambition, of the subtle fractures within the Death Guard, was only just beginning. The fortress world of Akaron hung in the void, like a festering jewel, its surface writhing with the slow, inevitable corruption of decay. Mortarion observed from the bridge of the pestilent dawn, silence resting at his side, its edge reflecting the sickly light of the rotting sun. The mists of Barbarus were distant memories now, replaced by the acrid tang of biotoxins, the hum of corrupted engines, and the subtle, insidious presence of doubt among the ranks. Typhon approached from the shadows, the faint scrape of his corroded armor announcing his presence. "The world awaits, Lord," he said, voice low and damp with calculation. "Our boarding teams are ready, and yet there is unease. Whispers travel through the ranks. Even among the most devoted, some question the pace, the method, the cost." Mortarion's gaze remained fixed on Akaron, the thick clouds below churning with a sickly green hue. "Whispers are the breath of mortality," he said. "They exist only because the weak still cling to life. Observation is enough. They will endure, or they will be removed." The plague teaches all who resist. Typhon tilted his head, watching him with quiet scrutiny. "Observation is wise, my lord. Yet I caution that hesitation may grow into defiance if left unchecked. Some of the lieutenants carry ambition in their eyes. Even they may question. Even they may test your command." Mortarion's hand drifted to silence. The scythe was heavier now than ever in his mind, a weight not merely of steel but of centuries of memory, of battles fought and worlds laid to waste. "I am eternal," he said softly, almost to himself. "I have seen loyalty and betrayal alike, and I endure. Ambition, doubt, defiance, they are tools. Let them show themselves. I will know them when they stir, and I will act with inevitability." The first shuttle detached from the hull, gliding silently toward the surface of Akaron. Below, the cities, fortified but unaware, twisted and groaned under the invisible pressure of pestilence, as if the planet itself anticipated the arrival of its destroyers. Mortarion's pale eyes followed every movement with surgical precision, yet even as he orchestrated the inevitable, he could sense the tremors of unrest within the fleet. A lieutenant approached, bowing slightly. "Lord Mortarion, there is concern among the squads. Some refuse to deploy without direct orders from you. They claim the weight of the campaign is too great, even for the Death Guard." Mortarion's eyes flicked toward him, cold and piercing. "Refusal is a mortal weakness," he said, voice cutting through the thickened air. "I do not tolerate hesitation. Every man who falters will learn the cost of defiance. Every action we take is inevitability, and the universe will obey it." Typhon's shadow shifted beside him, the faint glimmer of calculation in his gaze. "Even the strongest may falter, Lord. Even those who have endured centuries may question whether the path you walk is absolute. Do you sense it?" Mortarion's hand rested on silence, feeling the comforting weight of inevitability. "I sense it," he said, "and I accept it. Even in doubt, even in hesitation, the tool remains. Even defiance can be guided or removed. We endure because we must, and nothing else matters. The fleet will obey, or they will be purged." The shuttle entered Akaron's atmosphere, descending into the thick clouds of decay and corruption. Mortarion watched as the bioplague carriers dispersed, silently, invisibly, their toxins weaving through the cities and fortresses, bending the very flesh and stone to inevitability. Yet even in this display of absolute power, the tremor of internal conflict grew. Subtle, almost imperceptible gestures among lieutenants, the fleeting hesitation of a squad, the furtive glances that passed between men, all whispered of ambition and latent defiance. Typhon's voice broke the silence again. "Even as the world falls, Lord, the first cracks appear among our own. I have seen glances of disobedience, subtle murmurs, and the briefest hesitation in action. It is minor now, but Mortarion's pale eyes met his lieutenant's. Minor, yes, but noted. Every whisper, every hesitation, every ambition will be observed. Even now, the seeds of defiance are visible, and even now they can be guided or removed. Loyalty is tested in fire. I will temper it with inevitability. The cities below began to collapse, their structures warped by the subtle touch of the plague. Mortarion watched without emotion, as one might observe a storm consume the land. The inhabitants screamed, fought, and resisted, all futile. Yet as the inevitability unfolded, the awareness of internal fragility remained, pressing like a weight against the immortal mind. A subtle tension spread through the bridge, unnoticed by the crews but perceptible to Mortarion. Typhon's eyes flicked toward the lieutenants, noting small signs of unrest, micro-expressions of concern, brief exchanges that carried the weight of questions unasked aloud. Even in the orchestration of death, Mortarion understood that war was never merely external. It was also a test of loyalty, of endurance, of the subtle fractures that grew beneath the surface. Mortarion's voice broke the silence, low and commanding. Let this world fall, let the plague spread, and let every hesitation be observed. I endure, I command, and the sons who falter will either bend or be broken. Ambition, doubt, hesitation, they are tools, not threats. Even the first captain is not immune to their weight. Typhon inclined his head, a faint glint of calculation behind his corroded eyes. As you wish, Lord. Observation is eternal, and so is consequence. Even the most devoted must understand that their choices carry weight. The plague consumed the first settlements. Fires spread, walls crumbled, and the cries of the doomed filled the toxic air. Mortarion's gaze remained fixed, observing, calculating, and weighing the subtle currents of ambition that rippled beneath the obedience of his sons. In every hesitation, every whisper, every questioning glance, he saw the first tremors of betrayal. The campaign had begun in full, yet the true war, the one of loyalty, ambition, and the subtle fractures within the Death Guard, was only just emerging. Mortarion would endure, Typhon would watch, and the sons of Nurgle would learn that even amidst victory, the cost of defiance was absolute. The stars beyond the void remained indifferent, cold, and eternal. Mortarion's presence, however, was unyielding. He would endure, he would command, and in the whispers of rebellion, in the subtle fractures of loyalty, he would see the inevitability of all things brought to bear. The planet's surface had become a living tomb, cities dissolving into ash and bile, the air thick with the subtle hum of decay. Mortarion stood upon the pestilent dawn's command bridge, silence at his side, pale eyes scanning the twisted horizon of Akaron. The first signs of rebellion had not been whispers alone. They had taken form, small but undeniable, in the hesitations of lieutenants, the diverted orders of squads, and the subtle defiance of those who had once been unquestioning in their obedience. Typhon approached, armor scraping faintly against the corroded deck. "Lord Mortarion," he said, voice low and careful. "There is a disruption among the units preparing for the second strike. A lieutenant has refused a direct order. He claims the burden is too great, that your command oversteps even the inevitability we enforce." Mortarion's gaze narrowed, icy and piercing, yet calm. "Name him." "Alias," Typhon replied. "He is skilled, experienced, and among the most loyal of the Death Guard. Yet he has hesitated, and now others follow his lead quietly, without open defiance." Mortarion's hand drifted to silence, the sigh the weight both of steel and memory. I have seen this before, he said softly. Even the strongest will falter when confronted with the consequences of eternity. Even the devoted may question inevitability when it is delivered too sharply. Prepare the observation squads. Let us see the depths of his ambition, the breadth of his doubt. Typhon inclined his head slowly, the faintest trace of calculation in his corroded features. As you command, Lord. But he is cunning and subtle. He may influence more than we perceive. Even now, he tests boundaries. Mortarion's eyes, pale and unwavering, remained fixed on the mists below. Then we shall teach him the cost of defiance. Ambition must be guided or broken. Inevitability demands it. Prepare for containment and make observation thorough. Let him and his followers understand that loyalty is survival, and hesitation is the seed of ruin. The shuttle descended through the roiling clouds, carrying observation teams into the heart of Akaron's ruined cities. Mortarion watched, noting every twitch of movement, every faint expression that betrayed a fleeting doubt. Aelius's men moved with practiced skill, yet their hesitations rippled like whispers in water, subtly influencing squads nearby. Mortarion felt the pull of awareness, the gnawing certainty that even among centuries of obedience, fractures could form and spread. Typhon's voice broke the silence. He is subtle, Lord. Even in observing the inevitable, some among the men may be swayed by his influence. Do you wish me to intervene directly? Mortarion shook his head slowly, pale eyes reflecting the sickly green glow of the surface below. No, observation is more powerful than force. Let the fracture grow, but only under our scrutiny. The lesson of inevitability is not always delivered by the hand that strikes. Sometimes it is learned through the failure of those who hesitate. Let us see who endures below. Aelius gathered his squad, speaking in low, measured tones. Mortarion could hear them only as whispers in the psychic resonance of the mists that permeated the command bridge. We follow the Primarch, Aelius said, but even inevitability can be questioned. Must all of us sacrifice so completely, without thought, without hesitation? Is the burden of command truly absolute? The words were subtle, almost imperceptible, but Mortarion felt them like a knife against the sinews of eternity. Even the devoted, when faced with choice, could falter. Even the strongest could test the bounds of inevitability. And yet, within hesitation lay the lesson. Loyalty must be observed, tested, and enforced, or it would crumble. Typhon's shadow shifted at his side. Lord, you feel it as I do. Even in the perfection of decay, ambition and doubt stir. Shall I act? Mortarion's pale eyes remained fixed on the horizon. Not yet. Let us see the measure of the suns. Observe closely. Let hesitation reveal itself fully before judgment. Inevitability is not always immediate. Sometimes it is gradual, subtle, and in that subtlety, the lesson becomes undeniable. The observation squads noted the hesitant glances, the brief questioning gestures, the way Aelius's words rippled through the subordinate units. Mortarion saw the fracture deepen, not yet open rebellion, but a silent shift of thought, the first seeds of defiance that could one day grow into something greater. He accepted it, embraced it, for in observation lay knowledge, in the fracture lay understanding, and from understanding he could mold inevitability itself. A sound echoed through the bridge, subtle but unmistakable, a warning signal from the shuttle teams. Typhon's corroded armor scraped against the deck as he turned sharply. They have moved beyond whispers, Lord. Aelius's squad is defying orders openly. They refuse deployment. Even now, They hold position and question further commands. It is a test of authority, and it is dangerous. Mortarion's hand gripped silence, drawing the scythe close. The weight of it was comforting, a reminder that even in defiance, inevitability could be delivered. "Then we shall teach them swiftly," he said, voice low and resonant. "Let the lesson be absolute. Those who falter will be removed. Those who endure will understand that loyalty is survival. Let the world fall, and let the suns witness the cost of hesitation." Typhon inclined his head, though a faint glint of unease remained in his eyes. "As you command, Lord. The lesson will be delivered, and the fracture observed. But even in this, the seeds of ambition may grow. Be mindful that observation alone may not suffice." Mortarion's pale gaze swept across the bridge, across the fleet, across the swirling green mists of Akaron below. "Observation is only the beginning," he said softly, almost to himself. "Action will follow. Inevitability is patient, but it is absolute. Even the first captain must bend to its lesson, or he will be remade. And in that, all will endure, or all will fall." The plague descended upon Akaron's rebellious units, precise and merciless. Mortarion did not celebrate. He watched, measured, and noted the subtleties of hesitation, the glances of fear, the brief flickers of ambition. Even in victory, he knew the war within his sons had begun. The fracture was no longer hidden. The first act of defiance had emerged, and with it, the quiet, unyielding weight of inevitable consequence. The stars beyond remained indifferent, cold, and eternal. Mortarion's presence, however, was unyielding, observing, calculating, and shaping the future. He would endure, he would command, and even in the first betrayal, he would mold inevitability to his will. The skies above Akaron were thick with ash and the acrid haze of destruction. Fires smouldered across the ruined cities, and the ground itself seemed to writhe beneath the subtle touch of pestilence. Mortarion stood upon the pestilent dawn, silence resting at his side, its edge faintly reflecting the sickly light of the corrupted sun. The campaign had progressed swiftly, yet the victories were shadowed by the fractures within his command. Aelius's defiance had not been crushed entirely, and even in obedience, the seeds of doubt and ambition had spread among the lieutenants. Typhon approached, his armor scraping faintly against the corroded deck, voice low. "Lord Mortarion, the worlds we have touched bear the mark of inevitability, yet, even now, hesitation persists. Aelius and his followers continue to question orders subtly, and others have begun to mirror their doubts. The fracture is spreading, Mortarion's pale eyes narrowed, icy and unwavering. "Inevitable decay is a teacher," he said. "Those who falter will learn, and those who endure will understand the cost of hesitation. Observation is not enough now. We must act, but with precision. The fracture must be pruned, not eradicated. Let defiance reveal itself fully, and then deliver inevitability in its purest form." Typhon inclined his head, a faint glint of calculation behind his corroded mask. "As you command, Lord. Yet even in action, subtlety may fail. Ambition spreads faster than reason, and hesitation can ripple like a disease through the ranks. Even the strongest may falter if the lesson is delivered too harshly." Mortarion's gaze drifted to the viewport, where the ruined cities of Akaron stretched below, a chaotic landscape of rot, fire, and despair. "The lesson must be absolute," he said softly, almost to himself. "Yet timing is everything. Inevitability is patient, but it is relentless. Those who defy us will learn, but only after their hesitation is fully revealed. The cost of rebellion must be undeniable." The shuttle teams descended once more, moving through the toxic haze toward the last pockets of resistance. Mortarion's mind, honed over centuries of war and observation, calculated every variable: the placement of squads, the spread of the plague, the subtle gestures of doubt among his sons. Even in victory, he observed the fissures forming, noting who faltered and who endured. Aelius led his squad through the ruins, moving cautiously, their expressions a mixture of fear, determination, and uncertainty. Mortarion could sense the micro-expressions, the subtle tensions, even the unspoken exchanges that passed between them. Loyalty was not uniform. It was fragile and malleable, shaped by fear, admiration, and ambition. He noted it all, his presence a cold weight pressing upon every action and thought. Typhon's voice broke the silence. Lord, the hesitant are visible now. The subtle acts of defiance have become overt enough to be observed directly. Shall we confront them openly? Mortarion's hand drifted to silence, its cold weight grounding him in the certainty of inevitability. Yes, he said, voice low and commanding, but the confrontation must not merely punish. It must instruct. Even rebellion has its purpose when guided correctly. Let Aelius and his followers witness the consequences of hesitation fully, and let the rest learn from the example. The shuttle teams landed among the rebels, deploying with clinical precision. Mortarion observed the unfolding scene from the bridge, noting every reaction, the slight hesitation before an order was followed, the flash of doubt in a lieutenant's eye, the way fear and ambition intertwined in the motions of soldiers conditioned to obey. This was the true battlefield, not the ruined cities or the plague-stricken inhabitants, but the hearts and minds of those who served him. Aelius stepped forward, addressing his followers in measured tones. We follow the Primarch, he said, yet the cost of obedience is absolute. Even inevitability must be questioned if it demands the surrender of all thought, all judgment, all conscience. Are we merely instruments of decay, or are we beings who endure with understanding? The words were subtle, almost imperceptible, yet Mortarion felt them as sharply as a blade. Even among the devoted, doubt could spread, like poison in water. Ambition and hesitation had become tangible forces, bending the will of the men before them. Mortarion did not intervene immediately. He observed, letting the tension grow until the lesson of inevitability could be delivered with maximum effect. Typhon's shadow shifted at his side, faintly uneasy. Lord, even in observation, the fracture may widen. The hesitant may embolden others, and the cost of patience could be greater than expected. Shall we act now? Mortarion's pale eyes remained fixed on the scene below, noting every subtle act of hesitation, every glance, every twitch of defiance. Now, he said finally, but subtly. Let inevitability strike not as a hammer, but as a shadow, pervasive and inescapable. Let them learn that even the smallest act of defiance carries weight. The plague descended upon Aelius's squad, precise, invisible, and inescapable. Mortarion did not raise his scythe. He observed the subtle hesitation, the questioning glance, the whispered uncertainty. All were swept away in the cold certainty of inevitability. Yet even in this act, he noted the seeds that remained. Observation, he knew, was continuous. Even punishment did not end doubt. It merely reshaped it. The city below quivered under the slow, relentless corruption. Fires spread, walls crumbled, and the cries of the doomed filled the air. Mortarion's presence, like a cold spectre, pressed upon every soldier and lieutenant, observing, calculating, and shaping loyalty through fear and understanding. Even as the rebellion was contained, The psychological war had only begun. Typhon's voice was almost reverent in its caution. The lesson is delivered, Lord. Yet, even in success, the subtle fractures remain. Loyalty is not absolute, and ambition endures even in punishment. What shall we do next? Mortarion's pale eyes swept across the mists, the burning ruins, and the trembling sons of Nurgle. We endure, he said quietly. We command. We observe. And when the next act of hesitation arises, we will shape it. Inevitability is patient, but it is eternal. Loyalty is forged in the shadow of consequence, and ambition will always test it. Let the galaxy tremble beneath the certainty of our passage, and let the sons of Nurgle learn the cost of hesitation. The stars beyond remained indifferent, cold, and eternal. Mortarion's presence, however, was unyielding. He would endure, he would command, and even as the subtle fractures persisted, he would shape inevitability to his will, guiding loyalty, ambition, and hesitation alike into the relentless, unyielding order of decay. The campaign continued, and with it, the slow, grinding war of loyalty, ambition, and inevitability unfolded, reaching ever closer to its inescapable climax. The air above Akaron shimmered with the sickly haze of decay, thick with ash, rot, and the subtle hum of bioplasma engines. Mortarion stood upon the pestilent dawn, silence resting at his side, its edge faintly glowing under the warped light. The campaign had reached a turning point. The external war against the Imperium was relentless, yet the internal fracture within the Death Guard demanded immediate resolution. Alias and his followers had tested the bounds of loyalty, and their defiance, though subtle, threatened to undermine centuries of inevitability. Typhon approached, his corroded armor scraping against the deck with a wet, deliberate rhythm. "Lord Mortarion," he said, voice low and careful, "the hesitant factions have consolidated. Alias speaks openly now, challenging orders directly. His influence grows, and some lieutenants are already wavering. The fracture is no longer subtle. It has begun to manifest in open resistance." Mortarion's pale eyes narrowed, icy and unwavering. "Open resistance is a teacher," he said softly. "It reveals the strength of loyalty, the measure of ambition, and the resilience of inevitability. Let them speak, let them act, for in the revelation lies understanding. Observation alone is no longer sufficient. Action must follow, but with precision and inevitability." Typhon's shadow flickered across the deck, a subtle glint of unease in his corroded eyes. "As you command, Lord." Yet even in action, the consequences ripple unpredictably. Ambition, when challenged, may mutate into outright rebellion. Are we prepared for such a response? Mortarion's hand rested upon silence, feeling its comforting weight. "I am eternal. I endure, and I command." Even rebellion carries the lesson of inevitability if applied correctly. Let them test the boundaries. They will learn the cost below. The ruined cities of Akaron quivered under the relentless spread of the plague. Fires roared across once proud fortresses. Buildings twisted and crumbled, and the air was alive with the subtle, almost imperceptible movements of those who had not yet succumbed. Among them, Alias moved, confident yet wary, guiding his followers with quiet, determined gestures. Mortarion observed through the bridge viewport, noting every twitch, every hesitation, every flash of doubt and ambition. Typhon's voice broke the silence. "Lord, even now, some lieutenants hesitate. The defiance is spreading beyond Alias's faction. Subtle glances, unspoken questions, they carry weight. Shall we intervene directly?" Mortarion's pale gaze swept the horizon, over the plague-stricken cities. the trembling squads, and the faint green glow of biotoxins spreading through the ruins. "Not yet," he said softly. "Let them reveal themselves fully. Inevitability is most effective when understood. Let hesitation grow into open defiance, for in that moment, the lesson will be absolute." The observation teams moved into position, silent as shadows, carrying both judgment and the tools of decay. Mortarion noted each hesitant gesture, each flicker of fear or ambition, each subtle exchange of words among the Death Guard. Even among those who had endured centuries of plague and war, the human or immortal element of doubt persisted. It was fragile, subtle, yet powerful enough to challenge inevitability. Alias's voice echoed across the ruins, carrying over the shrieking winds of decay. "We serve, yes, but at what cost? Must all thought, all judgment, all conscience be surrendered in the name of inevitability? We endure, yet do we understand? Or are we merely instruments of destruction, void of reflection?" The words struck like knives through the psychic resonance of the mists. Mortarion felt them, not as threats, but as the pulse of ambition and doubt, subtle currents that could either be shaped or broken. Even among the devoted, defiance could spread, and in that spread, the true test of inevitability lay. Typhon's voice was almost reverent, careful as he spoke. "Lord, they challenge the foundation itself. If left unchecked, ambition may mutate into rebellion. Shall we act now, decisively?" Mortarion's eyes, pale and unyielding, swept across the bridge, across the fleet, across the twisting green mists below. "Yes," he said finally, but subtly. "Let inevitability strike as shadow, pervasive and inescapable. The lesson must be clear and the consequence undeniable. Loyalty is survival. Hesitation is extinction." The plague descended upon the defiant units with precise inevitability. The subtle hesitation, the questioning glance, the flicker of ambition, all were consumed by the relentless touch of decay. Mortarion did not raise his scythe. He merely observed. The lesson was delivered, yet even as the rebellion was contained, the fractures remained. Observation, he knew, was eternal. Even punishment could not fully erase ambition. Alias and his followers collapsed under the subtle weight of inevitability, their minds and bodies reshaped by the creeping influence of the plague and the quiet psychological pressure of Mortarion's presence. Mortarion observed every reaction, every twitch, every flicker of thought, knowing that even in obedience, the seeds of doubt could endure, waiting for another moment to resurface. Typhon's voice broke the silence once more, low and cautious. "The lesson is delivered, Lord. Yet even in success, the subtle fractures persist. Loyalty is shaped, but ambition endures. What is our next course?" Mortarion's pale gaze swept across the burning ruins, the trembling suns of Nurgle, and the distant, indifferent stars. "We endure," he said softly. "We command. We observe. And when the next act of hesitation arises, we will shape it. Inevitability is patient, but eternal. Loyalty is forged in consequence, and ambition will always test it. Let the galaxy tremble beneath our passage, and let the sons of Nurgle learn the cost of hesitation." The campaign pressed on, and with it, the unrelenting war of loyalty, ambition, and inevitability unfolded. Mortarion's presence, eternal and unyielding, weighed upon every soldier, lieutenant, and world under his influence, ensuring that the subtle fractures of defiance were observed, measured, and shaped by the inescapable hand of decay. The stars beyond remained indifferent, cold, and eternal. Mortarion's watch, however, was unending. He would endure, He would command, and in the subtle fractures he would find the path to absolute inevitability. The sky above Akaron had darkened to a sickly green, thick with ash, spores, and the subtle hum of biotoxins. The ruins of the planet writhed under the relentless spread of decay, and the fires of the fallen cities cast flickering shadows across the desolation. Mortarion stood upon the pestilent dawn, silence at his side, the scythe's edge glinting faintly in the corrupted light. The campaign had reached its emotional and psychological apex. The first acts of defiance had escalated, and now the fractures within the Death Guard demanded resolution through action, as inevitable as decay itself. Typhon approached from the shadows, armor scraping faintly against the deck. "Lord Mortarion," he said, voice low and deliberate, "the defiance has grown beyond Alias's faction. Even those who once obeyed without question now hesitate openly. Ambition stirs among lieutenants, subtle but potent. Their influence spreads. Mortarion's pale eyes remained fixed on the horizon, icy and unwavering. Ambition is a mirror to inevitability, he said softly. Even in defiance, one learns the measure of command, the weight of consequence, and the depth of loyalty. Let them speak, let them act. And then let them endure. The absolute Typhon's gaze lingered on the Primarch, the faintest trace of unease beneath his corroded mask. Shall we confront them directly, Lord? Or allow them to unravel further, so that the lesson of inevitability is absolute? Mortarion's hand drifted to silence, feeling the cold, grounding weight. We confront them, but subtly. Let the lesson strike not as a hammer, but as a shadow, pervasive and inescapable. Those who falter will learn the cost of hesitation, and those who endure will understand the weight of loyalty. Below, the shattered remnants of Akaron's cities writhed under the influence of the plague. Mortarion observed the subtle movements of Alias's squad, the micro-expressions, the unspoken communications among lieutenants, and the faint flickers of fear, doubt, and ambition. Even in apparent obedience, the fractures persisted, waiting for the moment to reveal their full consequences. Typhon's voice cut through the silence, careful and deliberate. Lord, they are prepared to defy openly. The subtle whispers have become action. Even those who once obeyed without question hesitate before orders. The fracture may spread beyond containment. Mortarion's pale eyes, cold and piercing, swept across the ruins. Then we act. Inevitability is patient, but it is absolute. The lesson will be clear, the consequence undeniable. Loyalty is survival. Hesitation is extinction. Let Alias and his followers witness this truth. The observation teams moved swiftly into position, deploying with precise coordination. Mortarion noted every twitch of movement, every glance, every micro-expression betraying fear, uncertainty, or ambition. The battlefield was not merely the ruined cities below, it was the hearts and minds of the sons of Nurgle, each flicker of doubt a potential spark of rebellion or failure. Alias stepped forward among his followers, speaking in measured tones. We serve, yes, but must all thought, judgment, and conscience be surrendered in the name of inevitability? We endure, but do we understand? Or are we merely instruments of destruction, void of reflection? The words cut through the psychic haze like blades, and Mortarion felt them as sharply as any weapon. Even among centuries of devotion, defiance could grow, subtle yet potent, influencing the hesitant and emboldening the cautious. It was the first true test of loyalty and inevitability combined. Typhon's voice was nearly reverent. Lord, even now the fractures may widen. Open defiance spreads faster than whispers. Shall we strike decisively? Mortarion's pale gaze remained fixed on the horizon, on the trembling figures below, and on the distant, indifferent stars beyond. "Yes," he said, voice low and absolute, but subtly. "Let the lesson unfold as shadow, inevitable yet pervasive. Even in obedience, they must feel the weight of consequence. Ambition and doubt are tools. Loyalty is forged in their crucible. The plague descended upon the rebellious units with relentless precision, consuming hesitation, doubt, and open defiance alike. Mortarion observed, his expression unyielding, noting every reaction, every twitch, every thought flickering, behind the eyes of those who had challenged inevitability. The lesson was delivered, but the subtle fractures remained, persistent as the rot that gnawed at Akaron itself. Aelius and his followers collapsed under the weight of both psychological and corporeal inevitability. Mortarion watched silently as the subtle, fragile threads of ambition and doubt were reshaped through fear, decay, and the inexorable logic of consequence. Even in apparent victory, he understood that observation was eternal. Even punishment could not fully erase ambition, only redirect it. Typhon spoke again, voice cautious, tinged with the awareness of the fragile balance. "Lord, the lesson has been delivered, yet the fractures remain. Loyalty has been reshaped, but ambition endures, subtle but potent. What is our next course?" Mortarion's pale gaze swept across the corrupted skies, the burning ruins below, and the trembling suns of Nurgle. "We endure," he said softly. "We command. We observe. And when hesitation arises again, we will shape it once more. Inevitability is patient, but eternal. Loyalty is forged in consequence, and ambition will always test it. Let the galaxy tremble beneath our passage, and let the sons of Nurgle understand the absolute cost of defiance." The stars beyond the void remained indifferent, cold, and eternal. Mortarion's presence, however, pressed upon every soldier, lieutenant, and world under his influence, ensuring that the subtle fractures of defiance were observed, measured, and guided by the inexorable hand of inevitability. The campaign pressed on, and with it, the relentless, grinding war of loyalty, ambition, and inevitability unfolded. Mortarion's watch was unending, his patience eternal, and his purpose absolute: to endure, to command, and to ensure that even in the fractures of doubt, inevitability reigned supreme. The mists of decay swirled across the bridge, thick and suffocating, yet comforting in their persistence. Mortarion breathed deeply, feeling the cold weight of silence in his hands, the reassurance of inevitability, and the certainty that even the most subtle acts of rebellion would ultimately serve to reinforce the lessons of loyalty, consequence, and the absolute cost of hesitation. In the shadow of the dying sun, amidst the rot and fire of a fallen world, the Primarch's presence was unyielding. The external campaign and the internal war had converged, and the culmination of loyalty, betrayal, and inevitability was now at hand. The dying sun cast a sickly green glow across the remnants of Akaron, its light flickering over the ash-choked ruins of cities and the shattered remains of the fallen. Mortarion stood upon the pestilent dawn, silence at his side, the scythe's edge glinting faintly in the corrupted illumination. The campaign had reached its end, both externally and within the fractured hearts of the Death Guard. The war had claimed worlds, lives, and souls, yet the cost of inevitability was not measured merely in the corpses strewn across battlefields, but in the subtle erosion of loyalty, ambition, and conscience. Typhon approached, corrosion and shadow blending across his armor. "Lord Mortarion," he said, voice low and measured, "the campaign is complete. The fractured units have been contained, The plague spread to every corner of Akaron, and the lessons of inevitability have been enforced. Yet, the whispers persist. Even those who survived the purge carry hesitation, subtle but persistent. Mortarion's pale eyes remained fixed on the horizon, upon the charred landscapes and the sickly green haze that rose from the world below. Hesitation endures, he said softly. Even when the lesson is absolute, the mind questions. Mortality is fragile, and even the immortal can sense the weight of consequence. But all will endure. All must endure. This is the cost of loyalty and the weight of inevitability. Typhon inclined his head, understanding but cautious. And the sons, Lord, Alias and the others, they bear the imprint of consequence, yet the seeds of doubt remain. What shall we do with them now? Mortarion's hand rested upon silence, feeling the cold, grounding weight of the scythe. They endure because they must. Each hesitation, each act of defiance has been reshaped into understanding. The cost of rebellion has been paid, yet the memory of consequence will guide them. Ambition persists, but under observation it becomes discipline. They will serve, or they will be remade entirely. Below, the cities smouldered, the fires consuming both stone and flesh, and the subtle hum of decay whispered through the mists. Mortarion could sense the surviving units moving among the ruins, haunted, obedient, and changed. Even in obedience, there remained the faint pulse of doubt, but now it was tempered by fear, understanding, and the weight of inevitability. Typhon's voice was careful, aware of the fragile balance. Lord, the galaxy watches as we leave. Akaron is yours, yet the cost is immense. Even immortals must acknowledge the price of eternity. What will you do next? Mortarion's pale eyes swept across the horizon, the distant, indifferent stars beyond, and the charred remnants of a world remade through plague and command. I endure, he said softly. I observe. I command. The galaxy is infinite, and time is eternal. The cost of immortality is the endless witness to decay, the relentless burden of command, and the shaping of inevitability. Even as worlds fall, I endure, and my sons endure. That is the only truth. Typhon hesitated, the faintest trace of unease behind his corroded mask. And the first captain, Lord, and the others who faltered? Even now their eyes carry the memory of hesitation. They serve, but not without thought, not without the shadow of rebellion lingering in their minds. Mortarion's hand tightened upon silence, the weight of centuries grounding him. Let them carry it, he said. Even in memory, the lesson shapes the soul. Loyalty forged in consequence endures longer than obedience born of fear alone. The cost of hesitation is eternal, but so too is the guidance of inevitability. They will serve, or they will be remade. That is the nature of the sons of Nurgle. The surface of Akaron quivered under the final spread of the plague, the last pockets of resistance crumbling under decay and inevitability alike. Mortarion observed silently, noting the micro-expressions, the tremors of thought, and the faint flickers of ambition. Even in absolute obedience, the memory of consequence lingered, a permanent scar upon the minds of the surviving sons. Typhon's voice was almost reverent. Lord, the campaign is complete, yet the echoes of hesitation remain. Even mortality is fragile, yet immortality bears the burden of memory. How do you bear it, Lord? How do you endure the witness of infinite decay? Mortarion's pale gaze swept across the ruined cities, the fires, the mists, and the distant, cold stars beyond. I endure because I must, he said softly. I command because command is inevitable. Even the immortal carries the weight of consequence. Yet in that weight lies purpose. The galaxy is eternal, decay is eternal, and I am eternal. The cost of immortality is the endless witness to loss, the shaping of inevitability, and the burden of guiding loyalty, ambition, and doubt alike. That is all I know, and all I shall ever know. Typhon inclined his head, understanding but silent, as the mists of decay swirled across the bridge. Mortarion's gaze remained fixed on the horizon, pale eyes reflecting the dying sun, the burning cities, and the twisted remnants of a world remade through plague, command, and the inexorable weight of inevitability. The surviving units below moved through the ruins, obedient yet haunted, their steps guided by fear, understanding, and the memory of consequence. Even in victory, Mortarion knew that loyalty was never absolute, that ambition would always persist, and that hesitation, though punished, would never vanish entirely. Yet within this fragile balance lay the essence of inevitability, the shaping of mind, body, and soul through consequence, observation, and command. The stars beyond the void remained indifferent, cold, and eternal. Mortarion's presence, however, pressed upon every soldier, lieutenant, and world under his influence, a constant, unyielding force of observation and inevitability. Even in the final hours of the campaign, he endured, and his will shaped the surviving sons of Nurgle into instruments of loyalty, tempered by consequence and guided by the eternal shadow of inevitability. The fires of Akaron burned lower, the mists of decay thickened, and the last resistance crumbled beneath the weight of plague and command. Mortarion stood upon the bridge, silence at his side, and gazed into the eternal void beyond. The campaign was complete. The world was remade. The suns were tempered. And yet, even in the absolute, Mortarion knew that the cost of immortality, the burden of command, and the enduring shadow of consequence would remain eternal. He endured, he commanded, he observed, and in that enduring presence, inevitability was absolute.